love about leaders? When I think about leaders, I think about my friend Rob. Rob was the guy who took myself and like 13 of us snotty-nosed middle schoolers all the way down to Panama City Beach for a weekend retreat and played with us and had games with us while we pelted each other with tennis balls and golf balls and had pillow fights in our condo. And here's the thing, Rob continued to invest in my life after that trip, year after year after year. As a matter of fact, he was the one that ended up marrying my wife and I years later because of the impact that he had on me. And when I think about Rob, I can't help but wonder how different my life and my future would have been if Rob hadn't been there. And that's why I love talking to leaders like you. You're my favorite kind of people. You're the kind of people who show up asking, how do I be more like Rob? Or maybe you'd say it this way. What does it take to help a kid or a teenager have a better future, really? And it's a good question. I bring it up because likely you've thought about it before. After all, it's why you're here. You're watching this video or listening to me speak because you want to make a difference in a kid's life, but also because your time matters. I mean, maybe this isn't the kind of thing that you'd say out loud, but none of us want to waste our time on something that doesn't really work. And by the way, that's not selfish, it's just wise. And if we're going to give part of our most precious, most limited resource to someone else, we want to be sure that it counts for something, that we're actually making a difference. And so we ask, what does it take really to help a kid or a teenager have a better future? Here's what's fascinating. This isn't a rhetorical question. Based on decades of research, there is an answer, or a few answers, but one that stands out over time as making the most difference. And fair warning, it's more simple and more difficult than you may think. Here it is. It takes you. Okay, now you knew I was going to say that, right? But hear me out. When a kid or a teenager has a relationship with at least one caring adult outside their immediate family, they're more likely to graduate high school. They're more likely to have healthier relationships and experience more self-confidence and make wiser choices. They're less likely to commit suicide. And they're more likely to avoid drugs and alcohol. And it's more than that. For years, research has shown that young people with consistent and caring adult relationships in their church are more likely to continue to engage in faith after high school and less likely to walk away. When you choose to show up every week for a kid and a teenager, they will have a better future, period. That's why I believe what you're doing each week matters so much. It isn't about babysitting or chaperoning or just making sure nobody gets lost in the preschool hallway. It's about using your life to change the life story of someone else. In fact, because it's so important, a few years ago, some of my friends and colleagues began to research what makes a volunteer, someone like you, effective. It turns out that the best volunteers, the ones who have the most lifelong impact, all had a few things in common. And it didn't matter whether they were serving preschoolers or little kids or big kids or even college kids, the same 5 principles seem to work every time. The first one probably won't surprise you. It's be present. Nothing you or I ever do will impact a kid or a teenager quite as much as showing up. Now, it sounds simple, but I'm not just talking about showing up this week. I'm talking about something much bigger that happens when you show up consistently in a way that builds trust. If you lead toddlers, you know that trust matters. Maybe you've seen the reaction from a toddler being handed to someone they don't know or don't trust. It's absolutely brutal. And it matters even more as that toddler grows up. By the teenage years, you have to show up predictably so they know you'll be there when they really need you, which, in my experience, is often any time other than when you were expecting it. Now, on top of showing up predictably, it's important to show up mentally. That means phone down, materials already prepared so you can look each kid in the eye and let them know you're all there with them while you're serving. And then there's one more thing. Now, this may sound a little strange, but one of the best things you can do to be present for another human, especially a kid or a teenage human, is to show up randomly. Now, we know this is true as adults, right? When a coworker or a neighbor shows up at a meeting or where we expect them, that's great. It's expected. But when that same coworker or that same neighbor shows up to help you move or to help you celebrate your birthday or somewhere else that they don't have to be, well, it puts them in a different category, doesn't it? And the same is true for the kids or teenagers you serve. When you show up somewhere that you don't have to be, it puts you in a different category. When you pop up randomly at a birthday party or a softball game or a science fair or the school play, it just means more. It's like the time you spend with them is multiplied. So whatever you do this year, I hope you set a goal to show up and be present in a way that kids and teenagers you serve know you can be counted on. So the first and most important thing you can do for the next generation is to be present and to show up for them. But a close second is this one. Create a safe place. Now, we all know how important safety is. It's why we check and double check a kid's food allergies before giving them snacks. It's why we make sure teenagers have real adults driving them to events, and it's why we adhere to strict check-in and check-out procedures for younger kids. We all know safety is paramount. We also know creating a safe place is about more than being physically safe. After all, we all know what it's like to walk into a room as an adult and wonder, do the people here like me? Do I trust them? Can I be real here? Can I ask that question? And chances are, if we're asking those questions, we're really wondering, is this a safe place? So it's no surprise that kids and teenagers do the same thing. And they need a safe place in order to clarify their faith as they grow up. But you may be surprised to learn the very first step of creating a safe place. It's not creating allergy signs and printing registration forms, although those are important. But the very first step actually begins with tension. Now, I get it. None of us like tension. It's uncomfortable. It's also inevitable. If you're in a room with other humans, adult humans or little humans, there will be some tension. And for many of us volunteering, that tension appears when a kid asks a question we weren't expecting, or shares a difficult family circumstance, or when a third grader is so disruptive, we have to address it. Or a ninth grader says something so hurtful, we have to have that conversation. Tension in our group, between kids, or even in our own mind as we approach a situation is a great indicator that we have an opportunity to demonstrate that it's a safe place. Because the way you handle conflict and hard questions and discipline and fears sends a signal of how safe the environment is. It sends a signal that you and your group can be trusted. And here's the great part. Because we know every relationship has tension, you can plan for it. As a leader, you can pre-decide how you will handle difficult situations or awkward situations. You can practice your facial expression and tone of voice. You can even pre-plan for what you'll do when a kid says or does something unexpected. Ultimately, as leaders, one of the best things we can do for a kid's faith is create a safe place, because when we do, we demonstrate that our church is a safe place for every kid and any conversation. So, be present, create a safe place, and partner with parents. Now, how about we take a little pressure off? Are you ready? No matter how much you care about the kids and teenagers you serve, no matter how many weeks you show up for them, you'll never be the most influential person in their lives. And here's what I mean. Let's say you show up every week this year and don't miss a single one. That means you'll have roughly 40 hours together this year. Now, their parents, on the other hand, will have 3,000 hours. See what I mean? Now, imagine one day that kid grows up. They graduate. They leave your church or your town. They may not be on your roster anymore, but their parents will likely always be a part of their lives. That kind of lifelong impact is really like nothing else. So what does that mean for you and for me? Well, as volunteers, one of the best things we can do for the kids we care about is to partner with their parents. Now that means introducing ourselves and sharing what we talk about with their kid each week. It also means honoring them in conversations with them and conversations about them. You know what I mean. And finally, it means making sure that they, the parents or the guardians, get to play a leading role in their kid's life when it's time for big milestones or decisions along the way. Remember, your role in their life is temporary. The parent's influence is lifelong. So cheer for them, pray for them, and partner with them every step of the way. Now, here's a big idea for every leader. Make it personal. Now, by now you already know that making a difference in someone's life goes far beyond showing up once a week to a scheduled meeting. It goes beyond bowling outings and Starbucks conversations. It goes beyond emailing parents. It's about the example you're showing them through your own life, because the kids and teenagers you serve have front row seats to your life. Now, the question is, what are they watching? Whether you're a grandparent or a college student, a grown-up or a middle schooler yourself, chances are someone you serve is looking up to you. And that's a big responsibility. If you want the people watching you to have healthy relationships, they need to see it in you. If you want them to set boundaries, they need to see it in you. And if you want to inspire an everyday faith, then you're going to need to demonstrate an everyday faith. In other words, make it personal. You know what it's like to be on an airplane when they do the safety demonstration, right? What do they always say about oxygen masks? Put it on yourself before trying to help anyone else. Why is that? Well, it's because you can't help anyone else if you aren't okay. And the same is true for faith. As a trusted adult, you need a community of your own and faith habits of your own and a relationship with God that is all your own before you try to pass it on to the next generation. So make a plan to make it personal. Okay, here's the reality. There's a difference between attending church and being the church. And if we want kids to have a better future, that means connecting them to faith that doesn't just exist on Sundays inside our programs. It means connecting them with an everyday faith that they take outside our walls and into their everyday world. In other words, we've got to move them out. Now, notice I didn't say kick them out. I saw what some of you were thinking just then. I said move them out by helping them learn to put their faith in action and to serve and to get ready for the next stage of life. One of my favorite leaders says it this way: a kid may get over what you teach them, but they will never get over what God does through them. That's why we have to move them outside our circles and help them be the church at every age. So that's it. 5 big ideas every volunteer needs to know. Simple, right? Except it's not. I know that each of these 5 big ideas represents hundreds of smaller decisions and habits along the way. Saying be present is easy, but consistently showing up in a way that a kid learns to trust you, that requires more. Believing it's important, partnering with parents is one thing, but actually having a conversation with every single one and just remembering their name takes some time and intentionality. Like I mentioned before, this is more than babysitting or chaperoning. This is becoming a main character in a kid's life story. That's why you can't do this for everyone. You just can't. And depending on how many kids and teenagers show up, depending on how the church grows this year, you may not be able to do it for all the kids who attend. It's an impossibility. But I want to challenge you with a simple phrase. Do for a few. Do for a few what you wish you could do for many. Show up for a few teenagers. Be consistent with a few toddlers. Partner with a few families in a meaningful way. Share your faith with a few and serve with a few. And as you do, each step will feel small, but your impact over time will be bigger than you ever imagined.